Welcome back, everyone. Today we're bringing you a brand new explainer. And man, we are looking at a month that fundamentally shifted the global landscape. I'm talking about April 2026. It's been an absolute whirlwind of a month, characterized by these chaotic, completely interconnected events that are reshaping everything from global trade to international alliances. So we're going to unpack exactly how these dominoes started falling, and more importantly, what it means for the world right now.
Okay, let's dive right into this. 20 to 25%. That is the staggering amount of global seaborne oil and liquefied natural gas that typically flows through just one single narrow choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, think about that. When a region responsible for literally a quarter of the world's moving energy supply gets disrupted, the urgency isn't just local. It is immediately felt in every single corner of the globe.
To really understand the sheer scale of what happened this April, we're going to follow the blast radius outward. We'll start right at the epicenter, track the global economic ripple effects, look at Russo-Ukrainian War updates, bring it back home for U.S. diplomacy and domestic news, and finally, look to the horizon with tech, space, and global shifts.
So let's start right at the core of the month's global anxiety. Section 1. The epicenter, the Strait of Hormuz crisis.
First, we need to define a really crucial concept: an energy choke point. Basically, it's a critical, highly narrow waterway where any restriction sends immediate shockwaves across the world. This April, in retaliation for U.S. and Israeli strikes on military, nuclear, and infrastructure targets, Iran restricted and outright closed access to the Strait of Hormuz. It essentially turned this theoretical vulnerability into a very harsh reality for the entire global market.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this all builds. The initial spark of the 2026 Iran war happened back in late February. By mid-April, the situation escalated dramatically when the U.S. imposed a counter-blockade on Iranian ports. Fast forward to late April, and Pakistan actually stepped in to mediate talks in Islamabad. However, those talks completely stalled out over Iran's nuclear program and access to the strait. Ultimately, President Trump rejected Iranian offers to reopen the strait in exchange for lifting that U.S. blockade.
While diplomacy stalled, the military footprint rapidly expanded. As the U.S. deployed additional troops to the region and prepared the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier group to depart, the financial toll just absolutely skyrocketed. In fact, Pentagon costs quickly exceeded $25 billion. That's a massive price tag, and it led directly to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth facing rigorous congressional scrutiny. Geographically, the conflict widened too. Regional strikes hit fuel storage at Kuwait International Airport, Qatari waters, civilian areas in the UAE, and Iranian sites, which actually included a former U.S. embassy-turned-museum in Tehran.
You know, when you squeeze a global energy choke point, the pressure bursts elsewhere. And that brings us to Section 2, shock waves, global economic ripple effects. This is where this geopolitical conflict connects directly to your wallet and your local grocery store. Consider this really stark contrast. A Japanese tanker successfully made the first commercial passage since the war began. It's a glimmer of movement in a totally frozen waterway. But the broader reality is far bleaker. Thousands of seafarers remain completely stranded amid the blockade, caught up in this massive logistical nightmare that they literally have no control over.
So the crucial point is how this translates to our global systems. The shipping disruptions have created extreme oil volatility, sending U.S. gas prices soaring to their highest levels of the year. The pressure even fractured long-standing energy alliances. I mean, the UAE made the stunning announcement that it is quitting OPEC amid the turmoil and climate pressures. Furthermore, because global shipping is just so intimately interconnected, experts are now issuing serious, highly sobering warnings of a global food emergency.
Now, while the Middle East understandably dominated the headlines, the strategic map was shifting heavily in Eastern Europe. Let's look at Section 3, the second front, Russo-Ukrainian War updates. And this brilliantly illustrates the contrasting military realities of April 2026. Ukraine is launching a major long-range drone and missile campaign. They're hitting oil refineries and military assets incredibly deep inside Russia, striking targets up to 1,400 kilometers from the border, near places like Perm and Orsk, and even hitting a tanker out in the Black Sea. Meanwhile, Russia is continuing their frontline offensive operations, particularly over in Donetsk. However, those advances have been largely blunted by Ukrainian forces.
On the diplomatic front, April 29th marked a highly significant moment. Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Trump actually spoke on the phone for an hour and a half. During that call, Putin reiterated his war aims, but he offered a potential ceasefire in Ukraine tied to Russia's Victory Day on May 9th. Yet, amidst these high-level negotiations, we absolutely cannot lose sight of the tragic civilian toll on the ground. We saw continued Russian strikes on Ukrainian cities, matched with a Ukrainian drone strike on a bus in Russia's Belgorod Oblast that resulted in 3 deaths. It really shows the heavy human cost remains ongoing. With so much international turbulence, we need to balance our view by looking at what was happening right inside the United States. That brings us to Section 4. The domestic stage, U.S. diplomacy, and news. Amidst all this global strain, Washington hosted an incredibly historic and grand event. From April 27th to the 30th, King Charles III and Queen Camilla made a state visit to the U.S. Now, this was the first British monarch state visit to America since Queen Elizabeth II way back in 2007, and it was purposely timed to coincide with the U.S. 250th anniversary. It was just a fascinating moment of high diplomacy, featuring an address to a joint session of Congress focused on the U.S.-UK special relationship and NATO. The whole visit was capped off by a lavish White House state dinner hosted by President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump, clearly aimed at strengthening allied ties amid these global tensions.
But the domestic scene was a complete whirlwind of its own. In Washington, the administration saw a major shakeup with the firing of Attorney General Pam Bondi, while simultaneous legal shockwaves hit with a new federal indictment filed against former FBI Director James Comey. On top of that, we saw the Supreme Court issue rulings weakening aspects of the Voting Rights Act. And, well, if political storms weren't enough, nature delivered literal ones, as multiple days of severe tornadoes absolutely devastated parts of Texas.
As we pull back the lens from all this conflict in politics, it's really vital to recognize the broader advancements shaping our future in the background. Let's head to our final section, Section 5, the horizon, tech, space, and global shifts. The global business and political order was transforming so rapidly this month. Over in the tech and corporate world, we saw staggering numbers. Alphabet made a massive $40 billion investment in the AI firm Anthropic, really signaling this relentless push into artificial intelligence. Meanwhile, the Finnish firm Kone acquired German elevator maker TK Elevator for 29.4 billion euros. And beyond the corporate boardrooms, major political power shifts occurred globally. Over in Hungary, Viktor Orban actually lost power after 16 years of continuous rule. And in Brazil, the Senate notably rejected a Supreme Court nominee, which really shows deep shifts in political landscapes beyond just the superpowers.
But perhaps the most awe-inspiring event of the month gives us a profound sense of perspective. In early April, the NASA Artemis II mission successfully launched. This marked the very first crewed mission around the moon in over 50 years. What's truly historic and deeply inspiring is that this crew featured the first woman and the first black astronaut to ever orbit the moon. It is just such a powerful, hopeful reminder of human achievement and exploration happening right alongside our earthly conflicts.
We've covered some incredible ground today, from the epicenter in the Strait of Hormuz to the economic shockwaves, global battlefields, domestic turbulence, and finally our historic return to the moon. Which brings us to the ultimate question we have to leave you with today. With vital energy choke points tightening and a rapidly shifting global order across politics, technology, and space, what ripple effects will we see next? The cascading events of April have set a truly relentless pace for the rest of 2026. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes on the horizon, keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.